Hi, my name is Jason England and welcome to the Push-Through Fall Shuffle. The Push-Through Shuffle is an excellent addition to your arsenal and it will convince your spectators that what they're seeing is a genuine shuffle. It matches the kind of procedures they see in casinos, the kind of procedures they see on television, and hopefully the kind of shuffling procedures they're using in their home games. I hope you enjoy it, and let's take a look now at the actual shuffle. Hi, I'm Jason England. What you've just seen is the Push-Through Fall Shuffle. Before we get into the actual mechanics of the move, I want to talk briefly about the history. This shuffle is clearly one of the moves that comes from the gambling table. We're not exactly sure who invented it, but it's been in print for at least 100 years or so. In fact, Erdnase mentions it in The Expert at the Card Table, but unfortunately dismisses it as impractical. We have to wait until books like Greater Magic, Expert Card Technique, Jack Merlin's In a Pack of Cards, etc., before we get any good details on the move. Di Vernon also devoted all of Chapter 7 of his book, More Inner Secrets of Card Magic, to things that can be done with the riffle shuffle, and the push-through was one of those items. That's all the credits I'm going to give you as far as print sources go. I will mention 2 video sources. Richard Turner's excellent The Cheat series, which is available on DVD, and also Steve Forte's Gambling Protection series. Both cover the push-through shuffle. I hope you enjoy the move, and let's take a look now at the actual specifics. At certain points during the explanation, you'll notice we're using a deck of cards where the upper half is blue backs and the lower half is red backs. That's just so that you can always tell where the original top portion of the deck is and how we get it back to the top during the cutting or stripping phases. So now let's take a look at what I consider to be the essence of the push-through shuffle. There's a lot to be learned here and we'll refine it throughout the video. Take a look now. The upper half of the deck is cut to the left. The cards are riffled together, and the cards are actually pushed, not square, but pushed around each other, brought square, but still in a stepped or strip out ready position. And then the fingers grab a hold of these sections, pull them out, stripping them out, and replace the original portion right back on top. This leaves the deck in the exact same order that it began in, and this is the essence of the push-through shuffle. We will now take a look at some of the specifics of the move and how you can refine it. So here we're going to take a detailed look at the push-through fall shuffle. You begin by undercutting the lower half of the deck to the right. Undercut like so, the lower half to the right. And then you are going to begin the shuffle by laying a small bed of approximately 8 to 10 cards or so from the right-hand half. Then shuffle normally and end with a few cards from the right-hand half. You can end with 1 or 2, doesn't really matter. I use a small block of about 5 to 6. Using the third fingers on both hands at the corners on the short sides, and the second fingers at the corners on the long sides, very close to the corners, and the thumbs on the long sides closest to you, and the 4 fingers curled on top, you are going to push the halves together until they're approximately an inch apart. At this point, you are going to set up the cards for the strip out action by pushing the two halves through each other. The upper right-hand corner of the lower half, that's the red half, is going to move in a slight counterclockwise arc, and the upper left-hand corner of the original top half will move in a clockwise arc. As they move through those two arcs, they actually pass each other, and the left-hand side is now on the right, the original top half. The original lower half of the deck is now on the left. At this point, using your third fingers and your thumbs, you are going to grab hold of the respective halves, strip out the original top hand half, and place it right back on top of the deck and square the cards. The entire deck has now been fall shuffled, and we can now take a look at some of the fine points of all of those coordinated actions. The reason that we lay the bed on the right-hand half when performing the shuffle is because we do not always have the luxury of a nice soft close-up pad like this. If you were to perform this shuffle on a soft surface, you could probably get away with laying no bed at all and simply doing the push-through like so. However, if you try to perform this shuffle on a hard surface, the bed is going to become critical because it enables you to get underneath the cards, make sure that you grab the entire original upper half and cleanly strip them out to slap them back on top. That's why laying the bed is critical, and I always do it even when I don't need to. Another fine point on the shuffle concerns the direction that the two halves are traveling. This is what's happening. I'm going to use just two cards to explain this. The top half is removed, the cards are shuffled together, and then the direction that the two halves travel is this. It's a very tiny clearing action right up at, I concentrate on the upper right corner. You're free to concentrate on any corner you like, but I concentrate on the upper right corner, and as soon as the halves clear, the cards are now squared in such a way that they're never pushed completely square on the short ends, only on the long ends. Then the original cards are stripped out and replaced back on top. Those are the motions that you're looking for when this shuffle is happening with the entire deck. Notice the cards are pushed through, stripped out, and placed back on top. And I concentrate on this upper right-hand corner so that I can see when the cards clear each time. Right there, I see them emerging from the left-hand half. These fingers are going to squeeze and square to make sure that the cards are completely squared along the long edges, not squared at all along the short edges, and I can cleanly strip out the entire half and place it on top. There's no real shortcut to doing this smoothly. It's just a matter of practice over and over and over again, and you'll get to where you can slide all the cards out and place them back on top and get a full deck fall shuffle. So the question often comes up, when doing the push-through action, which fingers should you use? Most people choose either the third fingers or the fourth fingers. I'll show you the advantages of both right now. If you're doing the push-through action with the third finger, you have what I believe to be a nice balance of control, of openness, and of the necessary front cover that you will need when stripping the cards out and placing them on top to make sure that the shuffle is deceptive. However, if you would like to use the fourth fingers and give yourself a little more frontal cover, that's acceptable as well. I know several people that use the fourth fingers to initiate the pushing action. I've even seen people use the second fingers to push the cards through. This isn't something that I do, but it can be done, obviously. What I suggest is that you use the third fingers as your default, unless you happen to find that it's more comfortable to switch to the fourth fingers. This is usually the best balance for most people. So the question often comes up, what size brief should you use during the push-through shuffle? And by brief, we mean the distance that the cards are elongated. Here we've got them elongated, a little bit more than twice the width of the white border, a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. This, of course, is before the push-through action. After we've done the push-through action, it's approximately the same size on the other side. So, how big of a brief should you use? Well, of course, I recommend that the brief you use be a comfortable brief, and I believe that when I first started out, I was using a brief approximately this size, not quite an inch wide. This is an okay brief to use when you're first learning the move. In fact, it's an okay brief to use when you're performing the move in front of a real audience. However, I recommend that occasionally you push your limits. And the reason for that is you want to know what a very fine brief feels like in case you ever get into trouble and accidentally push the cards too far together. You don't want to be in uncharted territory. So occasionally practice a super fine brief like this. It'll be a little bit slower. You'll probably have to concentrate a little bit more, but you will be able to get in there and strip out all of those cards if you've at least done it once or twice in practice. And that will help you when the occasional time comes that you use a brief smaller than what you wanted. Now let's take a look at the false cut that I used in the original sequence. To perform the false cut, you're going to remove the original bottom section of the deck. You can use a half, you can use a third, doesn't really matter. For the purposes of explanation, I will use half the deck. Remove the original bottom section with your right hand, cut forward and then swing it back on top of the original top of the deck, but hold a thumb break at the rear of the deck, like so. You then grab with your right hand the original top half of the deck at the break and slap it right back on top. This completes the deck and the cards are back in the original order. If you prefer, you could do that in a 3-step action. A section to the top, hold a break. Another section to the top, continue holding the same break. And then finally the last section to the top. Done at speed, it would look something like this. That's 3 apparent cuts, but of course the deck is back in the original order. If you wanted to do this with an even larger number of packets, you could simply cut smaller and smaller packets from the bottom to the top, every single time holding the break at the rear with the left thumb. Something like that. This is a simple false cut, a simple tabled false cut. And although Erdnase does not discuss the push-through shuffle, he does discuss this type of false cut in his book, The Expert at the Card Table, and he gives many variations. I highly recommend that you check the book out if for no other reason than to learn this type of false cutting action. Now let's take a look at the up the ladder sequence. Up the ladder, also known as the gambler's false cut, was brought from the gambling tables to the magic world by Charlie Miller. It was originally published in Expert Card Technique by Hugard and Browie, and here it is. To perform the up the ladder sequence, you are going to undercut the deck to the right. In other words, remove the lower half and place them on top. However, you hold a break at the rear of the deck, just like in the previous technique. And then as you remove the original top half to place them on top, you don't go completely square, you actually side jog them by about an inch or so. You then remove a small portion of cards from the upper half only and place those square with the remainder of the deck. You then remove this entire out-jogged portion and place it side-jogged by about 1 inch. You repeat this series of removing a small packet and then removing the remainder of the upper half of the cards over and over again until finally the last packet is placed back on top. Now, believe it or not, every single card is still in order. I'll show you the top card of the deck, the Ace of Hearts, and run through the entire sequence here. Notice that the Ace of Hearts keeps being removed and placed on top of the deck. And every time we do this, as long as we end with the Ace of Hearts on top, the entire deck is still in sequence. At speed, it would look something like this. And of course, what you're trying to emulate here, you're trying to emulate a stripping action. Now, of course, that's not really what you're doing, but that's what you want it to look like you're doing. You want to look like you've cut the cards, and then you're stripping the deck down, and then placing the last small portion on top. That is the Up the Ladder sequence, courtesy of Charlie Miller. Thanks for watching the Push Through Shuffle. Before we take off, I'd like to thank 3 people that were instrumental in teaching me this shuffle over the years. Those men are Richard Turner, Darwin Ortiz, and Steve Forty. I appreciate their help. I thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you here next time.